Okay, today we're going to be talking about George Washington and his presidency. So let's start it off. Why George Washington? Well, to begin, he was very regal. He was sort of king-like. He had his white horse named Nelson. He would ride into town and he refused to shake people's hands. So he already had that stature about him. Also, he was a war hero. He's one of the main reasons we won the Revolutionary War. So naturally, everyone wanted him to take the position as commander-in-chief afterward. While he was president, he made many actions which we call precedents. A precedent is when someone does something that sets a trend. For example, let's say you started wearing pink shoes to school, and then after you wore them for a day, everybody in your class started wearing them. That would be you setting a precedent. The first time someone had done something, and then everyone else follows behind in your trend. Let's look at some of the precedents that he set. Well, for starters, he only served for 2 terms. Some people even wanted him to serve for life. Some people said, we want you to be like our king. We want you to serve forever. But he stepped down after 8 years, 2 terms. You know, they served 4 years, 1 term, and he only served 2. Another thing that he did that established a precedent was when he only preferred to be called Mr. President. Again, people loved him after the Revolutionary War. They wanted him to be called King Washington, but he refused that title. He did not want to accept that. He wanted to be like one of the common folk. So he preferred to be called Mr. President. Another important precedent that he sets is the idea of neutrality. We'll get more into that later. George Washington is important for showing the strength of our new government. While he's president, something occurs called the Whiskey Rebellion, in which farmers in Pennsylvania who decide, they essentially decide they do not want to pay taxes on distilled liquor. They rise up against the government and they basically try to incite a rebellion. What does George Washington do? He sends the army with over 1,500 troops to put down the rebellion. How is that different from Shays' rebellion? Does he have more control over the situation? What does that say about our new government under George Washington and under our new Constitution? Let's keep moving. George Washington is important also because of the way that he arrives at his political decisions. A cabinet is what a president uses, his close advisors who give him expertise and advise him on situations and give him ideas as to how he can best execute plans for the country. So the cabinet members that George Washington selects are Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. Also Henry Knox, who's the Secretary of War, but we won't specifically talk about that. Alexander Hamilton is the Secretary of Treasury. He's in charge of setting up our financial system. We also know that he's a Federalist. Thomas Jefferson is our Secretary of State. He is an anti-Federalist. Secretary of State is responsible for dealing with other nations. These 2 men could not stand each other. They were really political enemies. Why did George Washington choose these 2 men to be some of his closest advisors on making policies for our new nation? Well, he wanted to get a wide variety of ideas when thinking about how to best build our new country. He didn't just want a yes man that said, oh, whatever you say, Mr. President, whatever you say, Mr. Washington. He wanted a diverse group of people speaking to him. Let's talk a little bit more about his foreign policy. Foreign policy is how we deal with other nations, how we interact with other countries. George Washington's policy was one of neutrality, which means that we decided to stay out of all European affairs. Why do you think he chose to do that? Well, as a young country, we wanted to make sure that we did not get pulled into any alliances or any other wars. For instance, if we would have formed an alliance with France, then when they went to war with another country, guess who was also going to war? Us. George Washington wanted to make sure that did not happen to our young country because it could have all fallen apart. Let me give you another example. Let's say you go to a party with some of your friends and one of them starts fighting. Naturally, who's going to get pulled into the fight? You and whoever else you came with. That's kind of how an alliance works. And so George Washington said, we don't want to get pulled into any wars or fights, so we're going to stay out of all European affairs. We're going to remain neutral and not choose sides. Here's our last slide here. Okay, 2 important treaties happened under George Washington's terms as president. We have Jay's Treaty, which allows the British to stay in some northern parts of the country. Many people felt that that was being sympathetic towards the British and thought that that was really kind of going against our autonomy as a new nation. Then we also had Pinckney's Treaty. This treaty was where the U.S. gains access to the Mississippi River by gaining control of the Port of New Orleans. This is huge for trade, and this is going to definitely help to increase our economy. Farewell address. So, one of the most important legacies that George Washington leaves is his farewell address when he's resigning from office, when he's not accepting his 3rd term, as many people in his party wanted to encourage him to go on for a 3rd term, when he's basically saying he is going to now go into retirement. He gives a farewell address in which he states that the country should not form political parties. As you can already see, they're starting to form, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. He thinks that that will be the ruin of our country. He also believes that we should continue with neutrality, that we should not get entangled with other countries' affairs. Now, I want you to think, this advice that he gives in his farewell address, how has it helped our country? How did it shape our nation? Was it important for him to say this? What would have happened if he would have condoned political parties and would have said, let's form alliances with other nations? Let's keep that in mind as we finish our homework tonight. Thank you.
Bye.